forward to perhaps getting into this position of leadership and also the citizenry at large. We'll be focusing on two major things, and that is the state of unemployment, a lot of reaction to the recent appointments by the president to advisory boards this past week of senior citizens who would otherwise be thought best fit to be retiring and not taking up new jobs. There's been a lot of reaction, so we'll be getting some good discussion on this from our four-member panel as soon as they get here, as well as a Building Bridges initiative that is expected to give in its report any time from now. In fact, word has it that it might be handed in on Mashujaa Day to coincide with Mashujaa Day, but it is ready, at least from the team, the 14-member team that says they have the recommendations ready after their at least over 1 year of going through the different parts of the country and getting public participation, and which can be argued. Some people say they haven't been reached by the team, but we will be looking into that in terms of the prospect, what it has in store for the country. So we'll also be opening the lines up to you that you could call in and join the discussion and give us your views as you follow the conversation that we'll be having with the panel. They'll be having a moment, at least 5 to 7 minutes, to address the nation from their vantage points, that is from their background. Most of them young and upcoming leaders from different parts of the country and different disciplines. But first, also let's get through the papers and what you can anticipate or expect in your favorite dailies, and we'll start with the Daily Nation, as we'll be looking forward to them arriving. That is the panel, and yes, oh yes, the hashtag AM Live NTV is what you can join in with conversation online. Give your contribution, and if it catches my eye, I'll probably read it and yes, share it with the rest of the country. So thank you for joining us and allowing us to interrupt your morning, but don't be late for work. Yes, so we start with the Daily Nation, and this is a story that has been on the headlines for the better part of the week. And yes, we have Raila options in son Fidel's DNA order. Samples from former Prime Minister and his wife Ida will be used for DNA tests to determine if twins at the center of paternity dispute are their son's biological children. A court in Nairobi directed Fidel Odinga's on the right here, pictured here, family members to cooperate in obtaining samples for DNA test on twins after his mother, Mrs. Ida Odinga, said the children are her sons. She wants their interests protected in the administration of his estate. And another big story here, something you should be looking forward to, the return of expensive bank loans. President Uhuru Kenyatta has declined to approve the finance bill and asked MPs to remove loan interest rate caps, but the lawmakers have vowed to reject his memorandum, saying his reasons are not convincing. More on this particular story on page 6 of the Daily Nation. And we'll also see a bit more from the Business Daily when we get to that, on some of the reasons informing this decision on the interest rate caps, or the imminent interest rate caps, a review of the same. Another big story is 100,000 teachers apply for internship positions. And yes, this is something that you can also get more on, and I can see some of my panelists walking into the studio. This is TSC says it has received 102,000 applications for the 10,000 vacancies ahead of next Thursday's deadline. Still on the same issue of, let me just see if I can hold that right for my cameraman Peke up here. Yes, and this is ahead of the Thursday deadline, right up here at the top. And yes, European Union and UK agree on a new Brexit deal. But the Prime Minister Boris Johnson will still have to take the accord to a skeptical British Parliament for backing. And Saturday, I believe, will be a day for heated debate to see if it will sail through. Now, yes, bridge linked to man-eater lions turns 120. This is not politics, but just something that might interest you historians. It's a Savo Bridge on Savo River along the Kenya-Uganda railway line was built by Indian workers. Well, the big talk right now is the SGR. And yes, this is a new SGR super bridge that is pictured here, and man-eaters on the Mombasa-Nairobi highway. Now, this, of course, Indians working on the Kenya-Uganda Railway built Savo Bridge in 1899, and motorists driving through Savo West National Park on Mombasa-Nairobi highway marvel at the giant bridge on the modern railway line at man-eaters near Manyani Township. And there probably will be some talk about the extension of the SGR line, and there was talk about if this is a railway to nowhere. Well, we know what the president said about that. Mai Mahiu is not nowhere, it's somewhere. He was quite livid about that comment. And yes, let's just flip through some of the other stories. And yes, crisis looms in judiciary as budget cut by 50%. This is quite a concerning development here. This follows the National Treasury's move to slash funding to the institution this financial year. The article there by Anthony Kitimo. And yes, again, something that will inform the conversation this morning. Sorry about that. No place for youth as president gives state jobs to familiar faces. The face that you see right there is John Njiraini. And yes, President Kenyatta has brought familiar faces in his latest state appointments that have seen former Kenya Revenue Authority boss John Njiraini selected to chair the Geothermal Development Company in place of Gershom Otachi, who was recently appointed as a National Land Commission chairperson. We'll be getting a lot of discussion on this from our panel. And yes, we're actually just waiting for one more, and as they're settling in. And of course, this was mentioned earlier. It is expected that MPs will defy Uhuru over loan rate caps. The members of the National Assembly have vowed to reject President Uhuru Kenyatta's memorandum that explains his refusal to assent to the Finance Bill 2019. The MPs yesterday vowed to marshal the requisite numbers to overturn the memorandum, saying the reasons advanced by the president are unconvincing. Reasons that you will get later on with the Business Daily. Just a bit, it won't give too much away. And yes, this is a story on the teachers on the back page. 97,000 have applied for 6,000 secondary school internship vacancies ahead of next week's deadline. Many people are looking for jobs, and the number of responses is quite telling on the job market situation currently. So let's look at the Standard, and as my panel settles in, they could also chime in on some of the headlining stories. The Standard here: who will dare probe this man? Mr. Edward Mbogwa, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, has been implicated in a 700 million bribery and extortion racket. The Interior Ministry has ordered he be investigated, but officers are afraid to take his statement. Who will investigate the boss? 700 million, the big figure there, the estimated value in shillings of the property at the heart of a dispute that has dragged in senior security and immigration officers and politicians. There was a story actually that was carried on Citizen TV over the weekend about this, and yes, getting the reactions right now. And uproar as 800 clinics are shut in crackdown. Public and private health facilities closed in swoop, led by Health Ministry to improve quality of service, and counties protest saying directive caught them unawares. We'll be getting more on that. And yes, as well, they've captured this particular story on expensive bank loans. President votes with bankers after he rejects bill to cap interest rates, signaling end of cheap credit. 3 years ago, he stood with borrowers, saying he shared in their pain to make ends meet. This is also captured in the Business Daily in terms of the reasons given for this. And Shylocks have been cited in this particular story. And on the back page of the Standard, KPL to go on despite financial challenges. Now, if we stop, teams met yesterday after some clubs had called for suspension of league. If we stop the 2019-2020 Kenyan Premier League season, what next? And these are some of the questions that they're grappling over. As of course, there has been some great challenge to the sporting world, given the exit of some of the strong supporting betting companies. And we know what happened there with the cases and questions over tax evasion and some of the giants in the betting world exited that field, and we're feeling the effects in terms of the support it was giving to the sporting world. And yes, my panel is going through the various articles, and I'd like to just start by inviting them to give in their contributions and opinions. I have Franklin Mkwanja, as well as Arnold Maliba, as well as Nancy Wangome, and we're also looking forward to Nerima Wako to be joining us. She is from Siasa Place, and okay, I think I probably need to give them time to get some chai, especially Mkwanja. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying his name betrays him, but he deserves a cup of tea, so let him get his as he's served. Let's look at the Star here, and please, I just invite you to look through and some of the articles. If you want to chime in, you could right after you settle in proper. Now, Uhuru DPP reject Waitito request to return graft cash. Waitito wanted to pay back money that was allegedly lost in exchange for having the corruption case against him dropped. Now that's another graft case that has been captured in the dailies. We've seen the other one by the Standard on the Deputy Inspector General of Police and the intricacies there, and some of the other things that have been captured here. Uhuru fires entire KFS board over Likoni tragedy. President Uhuru Kenyatta has fired the Kenya Ferry Services Board following the Likoni tragedy and made new appointments to state parastatals. And on Thursday, the president revoked the appointment of Dan Mwanzo, named in May as a chairman of the KFS Board of Directors. This comes as no surprise. Even last week we were talking about this, the state of the Kenya Ferry Services, and given the tragedy that happened and the two, that is Mariam and Amanda, who were killed in that unfortunate and avoidable, many would say, incident where their car plunged into the Likoni Channel. And many people wanted some action taken, and perhaps this will serve as some semblance of action being taken. But there are more structural issues that need to be addressed at the KFS if these tragedies are to be avoided. Just a week after this issue, this was last week, mid of last week, and there was another Likoni, another ferry that stalled within that particular area, and there was a tragedy that could have happened there, and you can only imagine the numbers that would have been involved in terms of fatalities. And yes, what 63 billion shillings City Expressway will look like. The launch of the JKIA James Gishuru Road Expressway on Wednesday by President Uhuru Kenyatta shows Nairobi is on overdrive towards a better future. No more chaos someday, because we know there's a lot of chaos currently. Easily moving traffic, easy connections, no more crowded parking lots. It sounds like a pipe dream. Well, we definitely hope to see the day that it will be realized to be something that will be a story of back in the day when we used to have traffic, because it is bad and it can get really, really bad. And this is something that there have been some talk about. The state of former President Moi discharged from hospital, this article puts it, and he was expected to leave for home yesterday after undergoing treatment. Many have been asking, what is the state of Moi? Former President Daniel Arap Moi, pictured there with Raila Odinga, was expected to leave the Nairobi hospital yesterday after undergoing treatment. A doctor who did not want to be named said Moi was discharged on Wednesday evening and was to be taken to his Kabarnet Gardens home. You can get more on that, and that is on the third page of the Star. And yes, we will digitize all police services. We'll see about that. This is on page 2. All police services and processes will be digitized to ensure accountability and efficiency, according to Inspector General of Police Hilary Mutyambai. His deputy is facing questions of graft. Perhaps it's one of the areas that he should start with in looking into the systems. And yes, the article on the expressway, the 63 billion shillings expressway, is on the spread there, page 4 and 5 of the Star. Let me flip right through there. And yes, something else that we will be talking to in terms of the discussion today, and this is on page 6. Handshake backing MPs celebrate fall of Punguza Mizigo bill. There's been several push or campaigns to have some constitutional changes to make things better. Of course, by the words or going by the perspective of those who are pushing for this, like Punguza Mizigo. And just yesterday, there was a news that Turkana, the second county to support the Punguza Mizigo bill, was the only out of the many that have rejected this Punguza Mizigo bill by Dr. Ekuru Okot and the Third Way Alliance. We'll be getting more on this particular story. And yes, let me go to that one that I promised. This is on the Shylocks drive Uhuru to reject loan rate cap. Now, that's one of the reasons that the invasion by unregulated digital mobile lenders that charge exorbitant monthly interest rates is among the reasons that President Uhuru Kenyatta cited when he asked lawmakers to remove the cap on commercial lending rates in his memo to Parliament. And he will need 233 MPs for it to overturn memo from the President on lending rates cap. And this is going to be a big talk here. And wealthy Kenyans cut luxury car orders. I wonder if this includes Arnold here, because they're talking about wealthy Kenyans who have cut orders for luxury cars like the Range Rover, the Jaguar by 43% in 9 months to September. One of the main reasons, they're catching the eye of the KRA, of course, once the cars enter here. So Arnold Maliba, I'm sorry about that. You won't be able to get your luxury car in town anytime soon. I don't know if, as we were going through this, the papers, anything caught your eye, and feel free to chime in Franklin, you have your tea now. Nancy, karibu. So yes, good morning to you, and it's good to have you with us on AM Live. So anything that pops out for you as we go through the dailies? I'll start with you, Franklin.
Great. I think the politicians' take on the national dialogue and governance reform agenda remains to be quite interesting. Clearly, relating the national dialogue and governance reform agenda to how the 2022 general election will shape up is quite cheeky and very divisive in a country that requires us to be thoughtful about how we want to get our things done, how do we want to improve our democratic governance practice, how we want to improve social cohesion, how we want to demonstrate that inclusivity and social justice are key elements to developing this country. I think the most important thing to consider in this conversation are the issues which have been addressed by various judicial reports, the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission, the Commission into Post-Election Violence by Justice Waki. Other reports like the Kriegler report have highlighted these issues, but these reports have not received the necessary political goodwill to be implemented.
One wonders if the BBI will receive the same.
Yes, therefore, we have to make sure that the blunders that we did with this report are not entertained, so that the political capital that the BBI report then enjoys, the other governance reforms that have, that have been proposed by the interreligious, community, by other political players and actors, like even Punguza Mizigo, and what you're seeing by the Council of Governors in Gatuzi, and all other initiatives that Kenyans are saying, and the conversation that we have always had as a country. We must put all these propositions on the table, get analyzed, look at what are the similarities and what are the departures and what are the real radical departures, so that you can say, look, this is the direction we need to take as a country, devoid of 2022, which will come and go, and which is dependent on how we have this conversation right now, because losing the conversation of reforms today is as good as slaughtering ourselves in 2020.
Unfortunately, the issues of 2022 always take center stage in this, and we saw the retort
that temptation must be resisted at all costs.
And we saw how the president reacted and saying, "Mr. Kikazi nimechoka," and we'll hear that particular soundbite and upsounded just in a bit. Nancy, I don't know if this caught your eye, but perhaps something else. I see you have another report with you, but there's this story that's been headlined. headlining, and
Yes.
many will ask, why is it such an issue? This is Raila Options. You have it there. Raila Options in Son Fidel's DNA order. Anything that comes to your mind when you see this particular story, or any other that caught your eye?
The one that caught my eye is the 100. It speaks to a report that has been released recently on youth unemployment, and only about 10,000 may get a chance to get internship. And this is a challenge around the country where there is no linkage to the industry for young people that are being trained in different areas to be able to attach, learn the practical aspect of what they're being trained in. And this then affects their competence and their ability to contribute later. And the question is even whether they will get a job to contribute in the first place.
Okay.
So quite a concern. I think that should be the main headline, really. I don't
Not the
understand what this other things is. But that is a real concern because there will be no development unless we look at the training aspect of the labor.
Okay.
And so that is critical, and we will delve more into it.
We'll mine a bit more from that report
Yes.
that's out on the state of
Yes.
youth development and also employment or lack thereof. Arnold,
Yes.
as you were going through the papers, I've seen you flip through a lot of them. I don't know whether it was the issue of the luxury cars that really caught your eye. I'm sorry about that, but yes.
I'm actually very concerned with the headline in the Business Daily today. Primarily the headline looking at the Shylocks drive Uhuru to reject loan rate cap, and I think this was always coming. Economists told us as much. You know, every time you do a policy, there's always, when you're doing review, you look at the unintended outcome from the policy.
Okay.
And this was not unintended, it was not unexpected. We knew too well that once you do a rate cap, you limit. One of those things the president's memo that he's also not very honest about is that it's the cap alone that is pushing Kenyans to the unregulated Shylocks and the others.
Yes.
One of those things that is actually pushing Kenyans to go to Shylocks is that the state has also been borrowing locally. So once they borrow locally, then it means as a bank, I can't trust you, Mark, as much as I would trust the government. Because for all the reasons, government will always pay.
Okay.
And they will pay at higher interest. So that is the other thing. I know that whereas MPs are threatening, they will not raise the numbers to...
The 233.
They will not. That I'm certain of. You just need to confuse a few of them. Give a few of them some helicopter rides and they will not be there.
Yes.
So that for me is the biggest thing, and it speaks to the state of the economy.
Okay.
That the economy is dry. There's no liquidity, there's no money. And when there is access to credit, once credit is impossible to get, even business development, economic growth, and everything that, among other things, because if you look at our employment situation, you know that it's a market aspect.
Yes.
Supply and demand. So we have got a lot of supply, and the market, there's no demand for the supply we've brought into the market. So, and you realize that every time our economy does well, we have got jobs. It's almost straight. So it's not, and I've had this conversation with you before. It's one of those things that I've written about severally. It's not that our training regime is entirely wrong. It's so much of an economic function. I know there are a few issues that we have been doing recalibration. Of course, we have really changed. In the last 5 years, we've worked on the TVET authority, we have changed the qualification framework, we've introduced that. For the first time, introducing a horizontal. Before that, we didn't have a horizontal link between those guys who pick the technical and guys who go the academic way. We now have taken out that. There is a qualification framework. We have got even a qualification authority. And there's so much around that. We've put 30 billion shillings into TVETs in the last 5 years.
Yes.
A total of 30 billion shillings just to rework, to change the whole aspect. But we are coming way too late. And we all know, like for example, today we have got about 600,000 young people in universities, 600,000. Then we have got only 160,000 young people in TVET, or what you would call the TVSD. That is the other way around in Germany, where education is free, for example. It's the other way around in China. Because long time ago, we decided to look at preaching and technical work as the work of the less talented academically, and that was wrong. If you went to Germany, where? In Germany, people prefer to have a skill as opposed to have papers.
Yes.
But here we glorify papers. So we have, and that is data that is available even within the Ministry of Education, that today we have got 0.6 million people in universities, and only 160,000 taking technical, yet we need more of these guys. So it's one of those things, of course, we made a mistake in the past, and even as we try to remedy that, the biggest contributor to employment is going to be the economy. And of course, access to credit is very big.
Yes.
For young people, of course, as we talk about them, like you look at 100,000 applying for 10,000 slots. Any particular time, of course, people argue around this, you realize that we have got about 5 million people who are structurally unemployed.
Right.
5 million. They are there are types of unemployment. We don't want to get into that. But structurally, we've got about 5 million people at any particular time in this country who are not engaged. And that's so dangerous. Yeah.
With the promise that we had of at least 500,000 every year, or was it 1.3?
In 2013 to 2017, there was a promise of 1 million jobs per year. That was revised in Jubilee's 2.0. They brought it down to about 500,000. And all those have been promises.
Yes.
Because if we were to deliver on that, then the 7 years that Jubilee has been in power would actually have taken care of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's look at, as we wait on Nerima Wako, hopefully she'll be able to join us, and we'll be listening to each one of our panelists in terms of from their vantage points. Mr. Franklin Mkwanja, the Executive Director, Center for Multi-Party Democracy, he'll be addressing the nation from that standpoint. Nancy Wangome, she is a lead coach at Solvis Coaching Group and also the CEO there. And Arnold Maliba, as you've heard, the issues that he's been bringing out, he's a public policy analyst, as well as the team leader at Open Future Hub, and he'll be telling us a bit more about that. So as we wait on that, let's set the conversation first on the state of the unemployment, youth unemployment. Stakeholders in the education sector say the country is staring at a crisis. If the government does not provide an enabling economic environment in a bid to tackle the growing youth unemployment crisis, this comes as young Kenyans continue to express their displeasure with numerous government appointments to state agencies, saying the government is out of touch with the realities of young unemployed graduates in the country. Here's the story that was filed by Zainab Ismail.
While launching a report on the national study of youth in education and unemployment, education experts have pointed out the lack of a clear policy-driven approach and the imbalance in the national economy as the biggest deterrent for creating the right environment needed to bridge the high unemployment rate among the youth in the country.
The minders of this economy have taken their hands off the wheel, and this economy is careening out of control. And that's where you have these opportunistic spots where jobs are being created, called the informal sector. Even those spots for informal sector jobs are beginning to plateau out. President Kenyatta and his government must sit up and begin to think hard about what this portends for this country. We are on the verge of a catastrophic crisis which basically kills the present time but also puts our future in jeopardy.
The stakeholders say the creation of employment all boils down to policy and political goodwill.
I don't think one job as a chairman of an organization will solve the unemployment problem in the country. So I know young people say, look, you're only appointing older people. But we only giving out someone one job as chair of an organization, that won't solve the unemployment problem. So the unemployment problem is a lot bigger than just that one or two government appointments.
We can draft another policy and another policy, but if the men and women in places of power will not hold themselves accountable and honor their own word, it's a waste of time.
The report has identified skill gaps and mismatches associated with the lack of accessibility to tertiary education needed in the job market, noting that 84% of jobs available are in the informal sector. When he took over power in 2013, the president vowed to fight youth unemployment and to create 500,000 new jobs every year. That has not been the case, and young people have often expressed their frustration on the state of unemployment that sees thousands of graduates every year join the job search market. Since July, at least 2,000 workers have lost their jobs, and more companies are intending to get rid of workers before the end of the year. Zainab Ismail, NTV.
So you haven't, of course, missed out on the reactions to the appointments to various advisory boards by the president this past week, and there has been a lot to say about this. Let me start with Franklin once more as we prepare to get the pitches and address from the nation. And I see Nerima is walking in also. Are we overreacting here? There's a gentleman who's commented there. He doesn't think it will affect on country scale. Appointment of one senior citizen to a board. What do you say about that?
I think by and large, yes, I agree with Dr. Awiti that we will be the catastrophic, as he puts it, and not a dividend. Because we have to give our young people the necessary skills. Is it happening at their training level? My colleague Maliba here has put it correctly that we're emphasizing on purpose other than skills. And I want to agree with him more that in Kenya, a country that a degree is only important when you do not have it. When you have it, then it just becomes any other, document. And therefore, we have to ask ourselves very clearly, the skills, the competences, the knowledge that our young people are being, inducted through, is it sufficient enough to be able to help this country come out of the crisis? And the answer is yes, because, we have to ask, really, are the older people being appointed to these positions being appointed on merit in terms of skills, competences, knowledge? Or is it chronism? Is it political mobilization? And are the government goodies in terms of positions just meant to reward the political mobilizers and the cronies and the well-networked? And if you look at it, then the issue that the president has given us, that the young people have let him down, does not suffice. Because we do not have, when you say one position does not mean, but we need an older person, yes, perhaps, in that position with the necessary skills, with the necessary competences, with the necessary knowledge. If I zoom into the exact position that has caused this conversation to gain traction,
yes,
the act is very clear that the chair of the National Employment Authority should have at least 7 years of human resource experience. I do not think the appointee has the requisite, the requisite qualifications to take over that position. And on that basis alone, I agree with the Honorable Senator Sakaja that it behoves the appointee.
Would the conversation be any different if she was qualified? That's Mary.
If she was qualified and that actually can serve the purpose in that position and create, I think ageism could then not become an issue.
Okay.
But we must look at, is she skilled? Is she competent? Is she knowledgeable in this position that she has to help the country resolve the unemployment problem? And my answer is unequivocal no.
Okay. I see that Nerima, she's settled in. Welcome. Good morning to you. And you actually wrote an article, and I think we're good enough to be able to get a shot of her. You wrote an article here, and you're asking why the youth are not getting, or at least why youth are unhappy with Mary Wamboi's new job. As Executive Director for Siasa Place, you represent the youth and the interests of the youth. Is this uproar, misplaced? Because while you were just making your way in, there's a gentleman in that story that we were setting the ground with, and he said, it won't really affect much if we have just one appointment. I know the argument here is qualification, but just one appointment to a board, and with the country scale, doesn't affect that much.
Well, this particular board, it does, just because it's touching on employment. And the very basic fact is that we're in an unemployment crisis. So it needs somebody who has the qualifications. And that's why this one appointment is important. When we're talking about a database for all people who are unemployed being able to be placed in places of work, we're talking about someone who needs to understand the dynamic changes of the economy. We need somebody who understands young people and how they do business these days. We're talking about using Facebook, Instagram. The existence of offices is completely gone. We're talking about someone who needs to understand even agriculture and in relation to climate change. So it needs to be somebody who is fully aware, but not only that, being able to interact and connect with the majority population. So it is one position, but it's one position that has a great impact and influence. How is this country talking about building a nation when they're not concerned about how they're going to make those young people work to build the nation? So when you have too many young people without any access to employment, then what we're talking about is a crisis. So it needs to be somebody who is well equipped.
Yes. Maliba?
I think that statement was careless of him to say that it's just one job, it can't change much. That for me is a very careless and a very insensitive statement coming from a person who heads the TVET authority. That for me, I don't think it should actually go unchallenged. Why young people are actually asking for these positions and why there's so much talk about these issues, it's not, number one, per se around unemployment. It's also about representation. When the Constitution talks about the face of Kenya is also about demographics. When you talk about the face of Kenya, there are children, there are older people, it's not just tribal. And young people want to be there, not that we are trying to push for what would go for something they call gerontophobia, as in the fear or the phobia or the hatred for older people. That's not what we are doing. We are simply asking that young people also want to be part and parcel, and they are entitled to it in the Constitution. Yes. You are just trying to make Article 55 come to life. You are trying to make Article 100 come to life. So it's not really like we're asking for a favor. We need representation there. And I have sat on a board myself with older people, and I know there's nothing special about them.
Experience?
Quite a number of them, nah. There are older people who are just probably as clueless as some young people would be, and there are also other young people who are also much sharper. This country is actually run on the cogs of young people. The people who wake up in the morning and carry the weight of this economy on their shoulders are young people. The people who are protecting our airspace are young people. The people who are guarding our boundaries and borders are young people. The people in this studio this morning are young people.
Yes.
When you wake up in the morning, it's young people who carry the economy. It's so very dishonest of us to decide that when it comes to decision making, that is the only place we do not want young people. It's about decision making. That when young people come to the table where decisions are made, then decisions are moved away from the table. When somehow you find your way there. So we are asking that young people be part and parcel of this process. The president said that young people steal. Yet when you go to court, it's his older friends and his age mates who are in court. They are not young people. So I don't think that is true. Every one of those jobs really matters. And we are not saying that we do not regard the experience of the elder. It is Cicero or somebody else who said that if it were not for the elder advising the young, then there would be no state. Yes. We know that bit. What we're only saying is that can we have the face of Kenya looking at demographics, zeroing into the National Employment Authority. It's not illegal. The appointment is not illegal. I know people are talking about that. They need to actually check back and see guys have gone to court. It's just an immoral appointment.
Yes.
It's not illegal because when you talk about 7 years of HR, what they forget is that in drafting legislation, there is always that mischief end of it. It's actually added or an equivalent. And that is where they bastardize that particular clause. So if she has got some stuff elsewhere or anything else, it will pass. Since 2016, people have actually been going to court about these appointments. You need to look, including Katiba Institute, they actually have been going to court around these issues. And somehow you need to look at what the court says. Yeah. The State Corporations Act a little bit gives the president a higher hand when it comes to the board. When you serve on a board, you're serving at the president's discretion. When he decides that you go home the way he decided with the KFS guys yesterday, you go. He has got that bit. We have not really worked on Mwongozo really to make it sit home. So Mary Wamboi's appointment is immoral, not illegal. You can't win that on legal terms, you will lose.
Okay, and let's talk about then the immoral or the moral stance in this conversation. And Nancy, the argument has been in countering this argument of why are you giving the older folk these jobs? It's an advisory role. You perhaps need a citizen, the senior citizen, to give you advice. You know, you need those people to sit at such boards. And then there is that sense of and criticism that the youth have a sense of entitlement. What do you say about that?
I think the conversation is a reflection of the state of the nation, in the sense that parents and older generations don't trust young people, and we don't trust the older generation. Why? Because they don't want to listen, because we will not be able to have conversations. And so even at home where children are being, or young people are being told to do this course, it's a reflection that we don't have communication. There is a disconnect. The old think this way, the young think this way, and there is no link or communication. And the issue here is that if then that is the case, and that she's elder and she knows more advisory, then she needs immediately be below her. To deputize her needs to be a person who is 22 years old, 23 years old, 25-year-old, competent person who can give real issues that pertain to the young people. And if that was done, we would not be having this conversation. But the fact that it hasn't been done, and it's not something that the president wants to address, is a slap on young people and their nation and the state of the affairs when it comes to employment in this country.
All right.
Yeah.
Mkwanja, do you want to weigh in? Because we want to get to the point of making the address to the nation from a different panelist. And anything on this?
Yeah, I think when you look at the other silly statement that I hear from government officials most often is that young people have to look at creating employment than seeking employment. But what the president is actually doing here is employing the older folks. The other excuse I've had that go into agriculture. Look at the control, access, and utilization of land in this country. Young people are landless. Then how do you expect them to go into agriculture? Do you want them to farm in space? You know, they don't have access to these natural resources. And then you really want them to create employment, you want them to go into agriculture. I think there must be a deliberate, policy shift to make sure that young people are actually playing their role. Look at the way the Big Four agenda, for instance, is structured, and look at the amount of budget that's being driven into. You cannot see the real strategy towards the end to guarantee that there will be a change, in the bottom line once all these resources have been really poured into that direction. Okay. So we have to raise these questions. And as much as I may agree with my kindred, Maliba, that the appointment is more immoral than illegal, I mean, we must stop splitting hairs to create opportunities for individuals that basically do not have, the requisite qualification. Yes. And on this, it is that, yes, the president might not have broken the law, but then if it is immoral the way he puts it, it must reach the appointee that it is the right thing to do is to consider that they are not competent enough, they don't have the requisite knowledge, they don't have the requisite skills, and possibly the attitude to be able to effect change in the National Employment Authority.
They don't even inspire confidence.
We're
talking about job employment here. Nah.
There's that statement. It's been alluded that vijana wataiba zaidi because the older folk, they've made it. They don't have that appetite to steal, blatant stealing. It's been said.
How many young people are in court today? Evidence.
Even Professor Magoha said that, which I think is not entirely true, that Kenyans are thieves. And the only difference is that those that have opportunity are stealing. But on this basis alone, then young people have fewer opportunities to steal than the older folks because they are holding all the positions.
Yes, so it can't be true that you can't say that they would steal even more.
They probably would. Young people are at a place where they're hopeless, angry, frustrated. I would not be surprised if young people are put in position and actually steal a lot.
You know what we are not saying?
Yes.
What we are not saying is that there is a group of people in this country who practice what I will call ephibophobia. That is the hatred and the fear or the phobia of young people. That where young people are meeting, even if they were 3, the police have to look around. It's out there. Young people are being discriminated upon based on their age. Just because you are young, you are thought to be inexperienced and stupid. That's not true. Like I've already told you, the economy of this country is actually carried on the shoulders of young people.
Yes.
So if we are running the whole economy, why is it very difficult to allow us in decision-making places, especially where there is an authority to incur expenditure? We are not asking for all the positions. We are just saying, please balance them. Don't just balance. And the people they are giving, some of them honestly do not have an idea of how to run the country. Look at how the parastatals are being run. Look at the answers they give.
Look at how the country is being run.
Look at how the country is being run. It's not young people who are running this country down.
I think on that point I want to differ with Nancy a little bit. That we are pretty young and we're running entities that don't have those, scandals and audit queries of thieving. And we going by the numbers in court as well.
Yes.
And it's not possible that young people are then generally predisposed to be more thieves than the older folks. and look at the private sector as well. We do not have similar scandals, and the private sector is properly dominated by younger folks than the older folks. So let us not throw out these convenient statements out there in defense of actions that are not pushing forward this country, are not going to protect and cushion this country from anarchism, for instance. And we must be clear that the president is elected to make the right decisions. And so this idea that the president is better off with the wrong decision than no decision at all does not help this country.
Right. And Nerim, I saw you disagreeing, or I don't know if you were agreeing to that point about the youth being, more likely to steal, because there's that thing of my turn to eat. And people say it's when your person is at some point of leadership, then it's your time, whether for tribe or perhaps even the demographic of age, it's your time to make it or make it.
Before I even answer that question, I have to follow on with Maliba, where even registering my organization was difficult, and it was because it had youth close to governance. They had an issue with that. And it took almost 2 years to be able to have my certificate. And it's a challenge, and we need to understand that it's systemic, where our own government feels that young people are a threat, especially those who are enlightened without a leadership from someone who is older or a godfather. That's even worse. But to talk about the environment, about young people, whether they would steal if given the opportunity, it's difficult, because even for me, there are instances where you're trying to be an individual of integrity with morals, and I'm not going to do that. Do you know you're the one who's viewed as the obstacle? You're the one who is the issue in this system. They'll do everything that they can to get you out of the system. So as much as we talk about young people having to behave differently, how do you expect them when the environment doesn't even allow them to grow or flourish in a system that's moral? It's very difficult. So I guess it's young people are just learning what they've seen, and they're continuing it. Yes. So you cannot point what you do and point and say, well, you're doing very wrong, but you're the one who's doing it, and that's where they learned it from you.
All right. Yes.
And
then we can start with the pictures.
If you're going to blame this generation, please look at the generation that brought it up.
Precisely. Precisely.
And you have the answer as to why we are where we are today. Yes. All right. Let's get to the national address in terms of each member of the panel having their moment to address the nation. And I'll start with Nancy Wangome, who is a personal development expert, as she takes to the podium. And she's exposed to entrepreneurship and was exposed at the age of 14. And her passion to innovate was awakened. She began her volunteer work as a mentor for primary school pupils. And while still a Form 2 student, her work with the public and private schools, international NGOs, CBOs fortified her passion for personal development as a pillar for national development. Having founded an enterprise in 2009 and a limited company in 2012, she has excellent skills in leadership, strategic planning, conceptualization, and successful implementation of personal development programs. Currently, she serves as the lead coach and consultant and CEO at Solvis Coaching Group, providing coaching for individuals, enterprises, and talent academies, football clubs, athletes, CBOs, and students and parents. That's just a bit of a profile. No pressure to the rest of the panel, don't worry. It'll be a quick introduction to the podium. It's just to give it time to settle to the podium. And Nancy, your time starts now.
Fellow citizens, we are at a crisis. And I will attempt in the next 6 minutes to dissect this and explain possibly how we can get out, by first admitting how we got here. It starts at the family level, and I always bring it back there. If the president and his appointments reflect that he has no faith in young people, he's not different than many parents in this country who decide to choose which course their 18-year-old should take. The president is simply a reflection of the rest of the society, and they may be angry because he's rich and in power. But we are doing this at all levels. Aunties, grandmothers, uncles saying that, no, marketing is more marketable, without considering the young person's passion, interest, capacities. And this is why we are where we are, because every year, about 600,000 students graduate from high school. Majority of these students join either universities, colleges, TVET institutions, not to do what they love to do or what they want to do, but to do what their parents want them to do. That is where the disconnect is. After many of them train, and many of them are in the university, and once they have trained, they don't get jobs. When we were at KICD, when the launch for the Research on Young People and Employment was released by Zizia Afrique Foundation, the very day that we were there, the previous night, a young man had committed suicide. After years of being a graduate, looking for a job, not getting one, starting his own hustle, and it not succeeding. He was selling smokies. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gotten here by our own actions and contributions. And parents, I do not stand here to blame. I reach out for dialogue. I reach out to parents in this country that will listen to this conversation this morning to ask themselves, have I pushed my son in a direction he's not interested in? Because as we speak about the level of unemployment, and even talking about self-employment, you can only self-employ in an area that you love. And I'll tell my story. When I graduated from high school, I spent 2 years out of any kind of training. And I took this time to discover myself and know what I was interested in. By the time I was invited to University of Nairobi, I knew what I wanted to do, life coaching. When I presented this idea to my father, he ignored every word that I told him. I had a written plan that I gave him to read. He did not read it. He proceeded to say that when you go to University of Nairobi, you must dress appropriately. 6 years I fought him, and I say this without any shame because he's now my friend. I fought to say that I want to do life coaching. I don't want to do political science. And I was forced to go to the university. I spent 2 years there. Then I dropped out. I was depressed, considered suicide, had no one to speak to because they said, how dare you? They're paying school fees for you. And this is my voice to you parents. It is not that I was being unappreciative. It's that I had something in me that I wanted to express and contribute to the development of this nation. Because there was no dialogue, 6 years were wasted. Because there was no dialogue in my house. Because my father did not trust my ability to decide which direction I want to take in my own life. Money was lost because he paid school fees before I dropped out. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I must also address the young people, us who are angry and frustrated and considering suicide many times. We must appreciate our parents and how far they have come. We can disagree respectfully. And we can tell them what we want respectfully. And we can seek out people of the age mates, other parents who have gone through this and decided, yes, it is better to negotiate and see what they want. We can invite them on the table, but the dialogue begins today because many have already died due to this disconnect. So, Mr. President, I'm not happy with your appointment, but I invite you to have this conversation with your sons and your daughters about what they want to do, not what you want them to do with their lives. And if you do, then you will begin the conversation that will heal this nation first and allow us to have a relationship that allows progress, because there will be no progress minus parents. There will be no progress minus the young people. They are the majority. And yes, you have the money and the land, but we have the energy, and trust us, we have the brains. I've done what I do for 14 years since I was a Form 2 student, and every assignment has been a success. Ponder on that you may be frustrating the very solution that this country needs in your young daughter, in your young son. I would like this speech to be translated to all languages in this nation, because this is a conversation a woman in Kitui may not understand, but she needs it. So this begins in our houses. Parents, fathers, mothers, go home tonight and have a meeting with your family. Find out who you forced to go to a line of career that they were not interested in, and begin the conversation there. And ladies and gentlemen, if we do this, the potential in this country, the resources that we have in our young people, the lands that are not being utilized because you don't trust us to do agricultural projects, we will begin to build this nation. Because although we may be, how old is Kenya? Panelists, 57, 60? We are just founding our nation. We are young, and we must do this right if the foundation is to stand the test of time, years to come. So this is my appeal to the nation. Let us speak to one another. Dialogue. Parent to young people to parent, respectfully, and let us be willing to admit where we have been wrong. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Nancy Wangome, of course, the CEO at Solvis Coaching Company. And we can get quick reactions to this as we take, just before we take a break, because I want to give ample time to the next person instead of starting the conversation and breaking it in half. Some themes there brought out, but especially starting from the core, that is the family. And I don't know what your experiences were as you were coming up into the job market, and what leeway you got from your guardian, and just a reaction as to the themes and the subjects that were raised in her address.
I think Nancy's experience might not be really different for those of us who grew through to the 80s, 90s coming on. Whereas I could authoritatively say that I'm my father's most popular kid, I am also his greatest disappointment.
Why?
Because as of people of his age, he really, initially I started off as a journalist, of course, and he asked me, is that all you could do?
Oh dear.
Oh, wow.
My mother wanted me to be a doctor. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. Of course, later on in life, I've partly fulfilled my father's desire, but I went to law school primarily to become a better policy person and to become a better politician. So literally, the dreams and the desires of our parents, sometimes they try to live them through us. That is why they try to panel beat us into fitting into certain lines, because if I wanted to become this and I am not able, then I try to force it through my child, which is very, very wrong, because they deny us a chance to become whatever we can. And we should be allowed to dream and be free. When we do that, we become the best.
Franklin, you must be a proud point to talk about from your guardian as the executive director, the Center for Multi-Party Democracy. I don't know what your experience has been.
Yeah, I think I would want to extend huge congratulations to my parents for the effort to put into panel with me to the human being that I've turned up today. Yes, I have had my own disappointments with my parents, but I think they have been there for me. I'm privileged to have been taught by both my mother and my father, who are teachers, now retired comfortably. And their nurturing, their guidance is strictly what has created this individual that can be experienced today. And I'm seeing that kind of quality of parentage has to be impressed to ensure that the generation that we are raising, we able to sufficiently cushion them from the dynamics and of course the way you are raised, the environment you were raised, the time and the challenges were uniquely different from what we will go through as today's parents. Okay. But we have to be alive to the fact that parenting is not an easy task. And as much as we will challenge the president and the older folks, I think the Kenya's tomorrow is heavily dependent on the age bracket that my good friend Arnold Maliba just described, the 70s and 80s. that are raising, the toddlers and the teenagers today. And we're immensely challenged by technology and other, economic disadvantages. Like today, we have to create time for our children. We cannot leave our children to TVs and house helps and expect them to turn out any better. Yes. We can't leave our kids to our children to teachers alone. And I speak so because I was privileged, as I said, being brought up by a parent who is a teacher in classroom, and back home is your mother teaching you home science at school and coming home to practice together on how to fix. You definitely
did your homework.
And still quarreling later on why you didn't do your homework because you were taking care of the cows and such things. Yes. But that is really the kind of holistic life we need to give our children. Speaking their language, and I think this is one of the challenges that I've really seen, that while we grew up in an environment that we would be able to speak in our mother tongue, for instance, and would be able to socialize better with the extended families, that is not with my sons, for instance. They may not have an opportunity to frequently visit the village, and I don't see how then my dialect really helps this guy to perhaps he would study Chinese, study French, study other foreign languages. So that pressure, Arnold, of forcing my nephews to learn Yuawanga dialect is not fair. So let us be more of regional integrated than really going back to the village.
All right, Nerima, a quick reaction, and then we can take a break and start with the next person.
For me, I would say that I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life, but I was smart, but I feel that made everything harder because I could choose whatever I wanted. Yeah. And there was a point that my family, I was going to be a doctor, and that didn't happen. But it's because I saw, anyway, I went to a hospital for my first time.
Oh.
Job shadowing, and I was like, I'm not about this life. Yes. But then they have been supportive. There were some decisions where, including the beginning of Siasa Place and starting it. And they were just like, why would you leave a job that is paying and you're working to go and start something that you're not sure of? And there was a bit of that, we don't quite understand you. But then we talked it out, and so right now, a huge support system. So it does make a difference and an impact in your life. Yeah.
Okay, now Franklin Mkwanja is now going to look straight into that camera too and address the nation. He is the executive director for the Center for Multi-Party Democracy. Actually has been my boss way back then at Hope FM. I was actually his intern, but I guess he's proud of what has become of his intern. So, and my director is still calling me an intern. Franklin Mkwanja, your time starts now.
Thank you very much, Mark, and for being the most successful intern that I have had. And congratulations, and keep going. Fellow Kenyans, it gives me great pleasure to speak to you this morning about the present and the future of our country. This country is the only home that we have as young and old Kenyans. We have to purpose to work together every morning and every day that we go to sleep. We ask ourselves, what is the one thing that I did to take this country to the next level? And for us to be able to do it, we have to appreciate several things. One, that the difference between stable, democratic, rich countries and poor countries is basically the attitude of the people, the culture of the society, and the kind of institutions that they put in place to be able to govern themselves. For us to move away from the political upheavals that we're witnessing as a country since the reintroduction of multi-party democracy, since our independence, the kind of governance ills that we're going through, rampant corruption, unemployment by our young people, these are critical issues that we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to be able to provide solutions and not be part of the problem? Number one, we have to embrace dialogue. I look at the way we conduct our business, particularly in the political governance sector. We are engaging in a monologue where politicians are speaking to themselves, young people are speaking to themselves, the government officials are speaking to themselves, and we do not have opportunities to share platforms and tell each other, these are the perspectives from where I sit. And our work, as we continue, in our space, is to ensure that Kenyans are engaging in social dialogue to be able to collectively discuss and appreciate that the real solutions for this country comes from all of us collectively as Kenyans, that we all have a special talent, we all have ideas on how to resolve these challenges. The question of how do we get our young people to be economically productive are questions that have to be responded to. We have to assess, and I am glad that the CBC system is taking shape, but we have to look beyond the skills creation. We have to look at how do we get these skills into the job market. How do we ensure that our young people and the transition rates are real what we get in terms of the statistics that the government gives us. When we have over 1 million young people sitting for KCSE this year, how many of them will transition to universities? Are the courses that they're going to pursue relevant enough for our economy? Are the courses that they're going to pursue and the skills they're going to get in terms of training at the technical level relevant for economy? And these are critical issues that we have to look at. The way our institutions function is a critical component that we have to emphasize as a country. When we have commissions, when we have independent officers that cannot be able to resolve, and I want to particularly speak to institutions like the Land Commission, when we have these institutions and they cannot be able to resolve the challenges of historical land injustices, we still have challenges of land grabbing, we still have challenges of, access to, utilization of, and inheritance and such issues. We must ask ourselves, are we providing answers, or are we basically providing opportunities for people to earn a salary in these positions? We have to work on our political culture. We have to ensure that instances that we witnessed in Ganda ward in the political campaigns, campaigned by politically instigated violence in our politics, are addressed. We have challenges in the ongoing Kibra campaigns for the by-elections of the local area MP. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we move away from such instances where we cannot be able to sit around and be able to challenge ourselves and ask, what is the role of this elected representative? How are we going to ensure that the people get to elect the right person to address the core challenges that the Kibra people are facing, devoid of violence, devoid of the challenges that we are witnessing? We have to ensure that the political parties, for instance, that are receiving campaign financing from the state coffers, really get to utilize these resources. That, for instance, the Political Parties Act states that we have to get 30% of the political parties' funding to promote the participation and inclusion of marginalized and minority groups. I am standing here challenging the two national leaders, in the President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. How much of this money is going to young people, is going to persons with disabilities, is going to women, is going to marginalized and other minority groups, in terms of making sure that political parties have the necessary programs to ensure proactive involvement, meaningful involvement and engagement of young people, of women, of persons with disabilities, of marginalized and minority groups in party politics, and shaping, public policy through engagement in politics. The question of corruption is an issue that we have to look at. It is not just about the ones that are accused, but it's assessing our moral bearing as young people, as Kenyans, and asking ourselves, why are we having a lot of resources being wasted? And I have had issues about the wage bill. But if you compare the wage bill to the size of budget we have and bring in the aspect of how much money is lost through procurement, then you'll clearly start understanding that the problem is not the availability of resources, but the real problem is how we are unable to utilize these available resources to the common good and benefit of all of us. So, fellow Kenyans, our country will only be developed on the basis of having a generation that has the right attitude, a generation that appreciates that you must be accountable, a generation that appreciates that for you to be able to provide leadership in this country, then you must have high levels of integrity. You must rise to the threshold of Caesar's wife beyond any challenge. You must be able to provide leadership. You must be able to make the right decisions that really help this country. God bless Kenya, and God bless young people and all the folks of this country as we work together on resolving the challenges that we face as Kenyans. Thank you very much.
Franklin Mkwanja, thank you for your address to the nation, and it's talked about the job market, the youth and their place there, and what we need to do looking forward. We've talked about politics and the need for dialogue, social dialogue, as well as the issue of corruption that affects the whole entire nation in this, the fight for it and what it does to the economy. It bleeds the economy, and the services that many Kenyans are meant to have, they don't receive. Up next, I'd like to have, and we'll be responding to the themes that have been brought up by Franklin Mkwanja as you've been taking notes, but I'd like to have also up next Nerima Wako Ojiwa. That's something I need to put in there. Executive Director, Siasa Place. You've heard her mention it, and she quit her job, a very good job, after 2 years to come and form Siasa Place, which is an organization led by young people that engages young Kenyans, educating them about the Constitution, governance, and electoral processes. And she is here to address the nation, and your time starts now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Good morning. For me today, it's talking about change of perception. When we look at the proportion of our population at the moment, the very fact that as you go to work and you look at your colleagues around you, a lot of them are young. So there's no doubt that most of our population are young. So I can't figure out how our president is appointing 1% of the population. Ageism exists mainly in management positions when it comes to this country, and not just in government or the public sector, but also in the private sector. So, Mr. President, you are the Global Youth Ambassador. Your time is almost up. And what have you done? Other than many times we have been angry with you and showing that anger on social media. But there's something that I would like to share with you, and that is to change your perception of young people. They may not wear expensive watches or the suits or drive expensive cars like you're used to seeing people around you. And the ones that you appoint many times, they are broke, extremely so, but they have amazing ideas. But that should not stop you from interacting with them. 85% of the economy is in the informal sector. But what does that mean? When do you interact with the informal sector? And do you take time to interact with them? 90% of the Form 4s had D+ in the last 2 years. Does that mean that their life is over? Are we trying to say that 90% of our young people have no future in this country because of a grade? So what we need to do is change how we view success. We have to change what we empower young people to believe, that just because of a grade, your life is over. That must change. When we look at TVET, I am extremely happy that TVET has come into place, but there are still a lot of gaps when we talk about TVET. We have youth who are afraid to go to TVET because they are viewed as failures. We have schools that are still struggling with what to specialize in. But why don't we just involve these young people in coming up with these solutions? Young people don't own land. It's too expensive. A lot of them are prospering online. In fact, they've even stopped going to an office, but somehow they're making a living. But do you understand that about them? So even getting a license when it comes to business is extremely difficult and expensive. But we have to think about it. We have 1 million coming into an economy that is only making 100,000 jobs a year. A year. We have to think about that. That is 10%. It's scary. What are the other 90% of our population supposed to do? Our country needs to invest in our health sector. We've just seen 800 health centers, or whatever you want to call them, clinics, shambolic buildings coming to a shut. We're talking about health workers. We're talking about a space where when we go to a hospital, it's mainly young people. We're talking about children. We're talking about mothers who are giving birth. It is the young population. What are we doing there? when we even talk about the education sector, we're talking about 100,000 teachers. We need 100,000 teachers. And we're saying we have 1 million young unemployed people. What are we doing there? There are a lot of gaps. So as much as we tell young people to go and invest, are we overtaxed? Bernie Sanders is currently running a campaign in the US where he's talking about taxing the billionaires. But here, would we ever have that conversation when the billionaires are the ones getting the jobs? Those are the perceptions that we have to change to save this country. And to end it all, is just to say that we cannot move forward with a population that is so dynamic and growing so quickly, and you're not able to keep up, especially if your team can't even run. Thank you.
Wow. And short and to the point, that's in just under 5 minutes. Thank you, Nerima Wako, Executive Director, Siasa Place. Up next is Arnold Maliba, has also been speaking for the youth for many years. He is currently the team leader at Open Future Hub, and he is currently as well participating a lot in many conversations around the country as a public policy analyst. You've heard him mention his career path. He started off with his passion for being a journalist, as well as pursuing some law, just to strengthen his public policy analysis part of his passion. And he has been doing that for quite some time right now, and he would be lending his views to the nation, and as is his practice, to the leaders directly and unashamedly so. And Arnold Maliba, your time starts now.
Thank you, Mark. My challenge this day will actually be to the citizens, specifically to Mwananchi, because I think when things do not really work, you go back to the core. So on this day, which is 18th October, the year of our Lord 2019, my challenge to the nation, honestly, goes to the citizenry, we the people, you the individual, you the person. Because when all is said and done, leadership in all its inclusivity is what we do as individuals. They say that leadership is not the burden of one man, but a few are called, of course, to carry a bigger share of it. So everything we have, leadership as it is a summation of what we are as an individual. Leadership, like milk, ensures that the best comes on top. The cream in milk, the cream is normally the best substance in milk, we are told, and it will always come up. Same thing with the leadership. When we were young, we were told about probability. We learned about probability, I think in class 6-5. Basically that if you put 20 mangoes here and 5 oranges, you are likely to end up, if you close your eyes and pick randomly, you will end up with a mango. So the leadership we have is not imposed on us, but it's a representative sample of who we are. That's why I would like to talk to the people. It's almost impossible to get a crocodile being the leader of cows. The leaders we have are us. We deserve them. So it's true that stewards can actually make business grow. And those are politicians, those are our leaders. Those are just but stewards. But the truth is that for any enterprise, and I'm talking about Enterprise Kenya in this particular instance, is that for any enterprise to grow and get where it is, it's about the vision bearers, the owners, the proprietors, and that is we, the people. We know, and for a good measure, that the nation is not at its best. We have got a tanking economy, we have tribalism everywhere, bad politics, runaway corruption, joblessness, and the list can go on and on. We cannot continue lamenting and mourning the way we do. Of course, we have turned social media into, I like to call KOT as a congregation of mourners. We're always mourning, lamenting. Our social media is almost a book of lamentation. Every day you wake up, and it's fair that things are not going well. So we have to talk about them. But continuously lamenting and complaining like we can do nothing about it is also not true. We have got the capacity, we have got the right, and we're entitled to change this country. So I want to remind all of us that, first of all, you have got the capacity and you are not a child of a lesser God. I want to actually go back to the core and say that all of us must remember that we are the best humans to ever walk in this country. We are the dreams of our ancestors. That when our ancestors were walking, coming to this place, coming from different places, when they were fighting and defeating diseases, walking on foot, crossing dangerous places, they came here, they were fighting not for themselves, but for us. So basically from where we are not a helpless generation, we are not a hopeless people, we are that dream that our ancestors really were working for. Now, if we let the ball drop, we would actually have let them down. They were not necessarily living up for themselves. They were living up for today. So we have that duty to live up for somebody else. We have got the capacity and the right and the entitlement to change the ways the things look like. And I'm actually going to this because one time too many, and I have done this personally, is that we talk to the leadership a lot of times. We speak to them and tell them a lot of things. What we forget is actually to talk to the people. Like I said, we have a leadership that we deserve. A crocodile, like I said, can only lead other crocodiles. We look like those leaders. We might not be corrupt, but we are corruptible. We might not be, as in we might not be incompetent, but given an opportunity, we could slice and go down. So, as I talk about this, just to remind all of us that where we have come from, we are the best human beings. We can change, we can do something about our situation. And that, how do we do this? First of all, hold yourself to the highest standard as an individual. It's that basic, that if each of us swept our compounds clean, the whole nation will be clean. That if we hold ourselves to the highest standard possible, we strive to live our values best. It's difficult, but we strive to get there. Because if you do that, then you will not be in a position to give a bribe. You will not be in a position to bring up a corrupt child, because it also begins at home. We will not be pushing our children to do things they're not supposed to be doing. We will not be running an economy that looks like it's magic. You know, the way people do things in this country, sometimes you wonder. You know, from the occult world, there is a concept called money from nothing. So you see somebody who came from school the other day without anything, and all of a sudden he's riding big because everybody's looking for the next big tender and the big breakthrough. We have stopped working hard and we are believing into miracles and very get quick schemes and such. It is at the individual level. We do not expect our leaders to actually all of a sudden be angels. One of those things I've always said, and actually people really do not think it's wise, is that chapter 6 is overrated. Because chapter 6 can only operate with angels. But we cannot live like demons and expect that somehow some angels will come from heaven and do the leadership for us. We have to actually work that out. I want to give a story, because stories actually define who we are. An anthropologist friend of mine told me that the only difference between we human beings and other animals is that we are storytelling animals. That is what makes us different. Back from the caves, our ancestors will draw a cow and they will communicate. Today we talk about somebody writing on my wall and such. It's not new. Your ancestors wrote on each other's walls in the caves. We are just bringing that back. So it's about storytelling. And I want to talk about a story of a guy called Jack. We all have heard about this story before, but in different formats. So Jack has lived a lie all his life. He's a guy who had lived a lie. All the people he knew were liars. His mother helped him cheat his brother of his right. His uncle actually cheated him of a wife. Of course, in the Bible you call him Jacob, but primarily for this particular aspect, Jack is that guy who has lived a lie, cheated throughout. Everybody around him is a liar. The mother helped him to lie and cheat his brother. His uncle cheats on him. And we're not talking about cheating small things. He's cheating on him, giving him a different wife. You know how scandalous that can be. So this guy all through has lived a life. And midway, after he had run away and stayed away for quite a while, he decided to go back and make peace. So as he goes back that night, I know it's a religious story, as he goes back, one night he sends his children and belongings to the other side of where his brother is, and that night he wrestles with an angel. As he wrestles with an angel, it goes back till morning, and when day breaks, that particular man he was wrestling with, who is an angel, says, "Please let me go." And he says, "I will not let you go until you bless me." And that man asked him, "What is your name?" And he said, "My name is Jacob." We know that Jacob means a conman. Jacob means a liar. Jacob is not the best of names, that Jack name. That's why I used Jack deliberately. And he said, "From today you will not be Jacob, you will not be Jack. You will be Israel." Of course it has got its meaning. Why am I telling this story? I'm telling that story that for everything we do, there is always a stopping point. We can always turn around. The Islam have got this word jihad that has got, of course, bad connotations elsewhere. But from what I gather is that it means my personal struggle. We also, to actually get a proper country is our personal jihad as individuals, that we must do it individually, struggle to ensure that we are best human beings who deserve best leaders. If we hold ourselves to a high esteem, even the choices we make in elections will be different. It will reflect on who we are and what we desire. It's not going to happen miraculously that somebody from elsewhere will just show up and ensure that, now you live like the devil, but I'm here to offer you services like an angel. It doesn't work that way. It is up to us. It's our struggle to ensure that these things work out. The desire for a better Kenya is possible. It is actually possible to have what Vision 2030 calls just and prosperous society with quality life. It is everything that everyone who came ahead of us worked for, and we can do that. As I finish, I actually need to define where we need to go as a country. As a country, we are looking at, in my opinion, the third and final liberation. The first liberation was actually to get Muzungu out of this country, and people did that. We didn't pay them. They fought. They were young people. They gave us independence. The second liberation was to get better governance. It's embodied in the Constitution 2010 as it is today. We can say whatever we do, we can do some other things other countries cannot do. We have got a very good and very progressive Constitution and a very robust governance structure. But the third and final liberation is Article 43, and Article 43 is about socio-economic empowerment. It doesn't make sense for me to be a Kenyan in a free country with a robust constitution and good governance structures if it does not translate to the quality of life. So, that has to be the work of us as individuals, that we will work hard as individuals. We will ensure that we do things the right way and build this country. This country has gotten to where it is virtually because we have worked hard.
Thank you very much, Arnold Maliba. You have actually borrowed the time of Nerima Wako. You have her to thank. It was not corruption that I gave him a bit more time, but just to allow the time that Nerima had donated unknowingly. Some callers are online actually, and we'll have an opportunity now to just digest what has been said. You've been listening a lot to the other pitches and addresses. As people were watching and following, Derito Moredi says, just like in Russia, the reign of the Tsars ended. They too used to appoint the elite to rule and oppress the masses. Our revolution is coming. We, the youth, shall be tired soon. And many might argue that they're already tired, and the wave shall spare no one. Kennedy Omogi, he says, exercising what a degree entails is what is most important, and that is professionalism, integrity, innovation. And he was responding partly to what Mukwanja, you said earlier. A degree in Kenya is only important when you don't have it, and when you have it, it is completely useless. Some people have reacted to that, but they said exercise what you have learnt with utmost professionalism and integrity. So let me open the line. Oh, Ellis Gishuru, he says, he responded to that. You are not a degree, you are a human being who can think and define yourself in whatever you think. Uhuru, the government, whoever is given what appointment, your degree, all those owe you nothing, folks. Stop being lazy and think about what you owe yourself. Ellis Gishuru. So I believe we still have Anne online. She's calling in from Nairobi. Good morning, Anne. Unasikia TV, hata mimi nakusikia. Acha tumeanza na Kaikai from Egerton University. Good morning to you, sir. Please turn down the volume on your TV set and go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, Mark.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, my name is Geoffrey Kakai. I'm calling from Egerton University.
Yes.
My actually issue I want the panelists to address is whether actually devolution is working or not. Because the reason why we went amendment.
Yes.
And they came up with actually 47 counties was to address the issues of unemployment.
Yes.
But you see now, if you do the statistical analysis and find the youth from, let's say, from my county, Bungoma, and then youth here in Nakuru, for example, where I work, that's facing actually similar problem because we don't have a transition, education transition, where somebody from a university who have done this an engineering course,
yes,
we don't have industry to absorb these people. What actually, in my own opinion, I'm observing actually is that we rush to make counties. So that we need to have we've done something on analysis. These counties. Hello?
Yes. Go ahead. Sorry, that's the other caller who's intercepting.
If we are going for this PPI work, let's say because when we are going, maybe if we end up having a referendum, then we may need to have a smaller county that is going to be operational and, of course, productive. Because in the next few years, maybe 2020, globally we're going to have over and above 1.2 billion youth unemployed, actually.
Yes.
And we cannot actually, Kenya is not exceptional. So
Right.
in my opinion, actually, I want the panelists to see, do we have a possibility of actually amalgamating these counties, especially, let's say, counties that are too close? Like now, look at the case of Busia and Bungoma. Look at the case of Kakamega and Vihiga. Look at the case of Nakuru and Baringo.
Yes.
Look at the case of Kericho and Bomet. Look at the case of Machakos and Nairobi. Do we still need to have those counties? Or
All
we
right.
can have one county in each region?
Kakai from
An economic bloc.
Thank you very much for your thoughts and your question directed to the panel. They're noting it down. And we will first listen to Anne, I believe, from Nairobi, and then collectively address the concerns raised and respond. Anne in Nairobi, good morning. Oh, I'm told we have lost that caller. And just to respond quickly to that, as we were all taking notes, I believe, Nancy, you were listening in. And in terms of devolution, do you think it's working for us in terms of job creation as it's meant to?
No, it's just devolved corruption and inconsistencies, really. I really like what my colleague here spoke about, bringing it to the individual. The very people that are in governance are not competent, they're not capable, and so it's not working, not because it's not workable, but because the individuals are not competent enough to make it work. And so, again, it goes back to individuals working on themselves and being able to deliver in their positions in this country.
Okay.
Yes.
Franklin, and then Nerima, and then Arnold to the question raised by Kakai, then we can get to Anne.
Yeah, I think Kakai's question is a question that is lingering on many Kenyans out there, whether really the devolved system is working. And I think my initial answer is yes, because we can see some semblance of development, as much as we cannot, the correlation between the quality of development and the amount of resources that is going into is an answer that we need, but there's some semblance of development at the grassroots that we have to appreciate, that is coming up with the devolution. Yes, we need to assess the economic viability of some of these units, and I don't want to mention them because of the political, issues that surround them, but we have to ask ourselves whether these units really can be economically viable and whether they're really contributing to proper service delivery and also, generating revenue for the country and being able to be even independent units and whether they have a competitive advantage by themselves to be able to match the needs for devolution. I think the other thing is we have to appreciate that our devolved units were structured alongside the initial ethnic boundaries. And that is something that we really have to work, because then devolution is becoming a real epitome of ethnic fiefdoms. And to add on what Nancy has just said, poor governance, where you really have these ideas, the real appetite by the honorable MCS, the kind of struggle we're seeing in Taita Taveta, what Professor Kibwana went through in his first term and such issues. However, as we look at, because we chose this for ourselves, we wanted to devolve decision-making, wanted to devolve, wanted to enhance public participation, we wanted the people to see themselves in the kind of development that is it an opportune moment for us to reflect on whether we have the right orientation of devolution, because we have a devolved system where the center really is still powerful and determines what goes to the units.
I wonder if this was submitted to the BBI team that says they have a report ready, and
yes,
we'll touch on that if we have enough time. Nerima, a quick response to what Kakai threw to the panel.
Yeah, I agree with Frank on many aspects. Devolution is a good thing. The Constitution does give a lot of power to the people, but then is it owned by the youth? Because they're the majority, they don't understand it. So we have to start talking about social accountability. As much as we're looking at individuals and the aspect of values, values are critical, but also in the presence of law. We need to have laws that are followed to be able to even implement those values. We're humans.
All right, and I'm told there's Anne on the line. Is she still there before Arnold responds? Anne from Nairobi, good morning to you, and what's your comment?
My name is Anne. Yes, as you said, I live in Nyeri County. And my observation is that if the government was serious about giving the jobs to the youth,
yes,
then the appointments of people who are over 50, over 60 years should not happen. And even in the retirement bracket, maybe a bill should be passed so that anyone who is above 60 should not be in an office. And then they would look serious so that the people over 60, in which bracket I am in, should be phased out, because we shall always find something else to do, and then get our children who are younger to get the jobs. If the government is serious, I'm sure this can happen. Because if they did the 1,000 bill in 3 months, I'm sure they can introduce something to phase out everyone who is over 60, in due respect. So Honorable Aboy should not be getting a job. Maybe they could even employ 3 youths to do her job and split the salary that she was going to get into those 3 people until shall translate into feeding families, 3 families of people who are maybe even, they will even support their parents. But the person they give a job is somebody who's done their work. They have educated their children. They are even actually grandmothers. And whatever salary they get, it was given to the youth, it can stretch to 5 of them. That's number 1. Number 2. The retirement age actually should be capped to 60. Because at 60, I'll be able to go out there and do something else. And I've already recouped enough money to settle down. That's my comment.
Thank you very much. And from Nyeri, actually, it's not Nairobi, as I mentioned earlier. Not many people would actually volunteer themselves to be phased out from the active job market, as she has volunteered herself. But for many, actually, 60 is the age. We've seen what Jaguar is trying to do to put it at 50. But many would argue, that's probably for populist moves. Your response, first of all, to Kakai and then Anne's.
I hope that as I speak to Kakai, I can also speak to so many other people. It's not expensive to run government, as it were, because numbers as put out there are skewed. We have got this financial year, we have got a budget of 3 trillion shillings. I want to submit to the nation that for the judiciary, the legislature and devolution is not more than 450 billion shillings. I want to repeat that out of 3 trillion shillings, if Parliament is getting about 43 billion shillings, judiciary, of course, it has been split, and then the 316 billion shillings that is going to counties. I'm talking about the salaries we pay doctors. All the money, including what we say MCAs, West, governors and their clandes and slay queens, every bad thing plus the development you have seen in counties, which is actually very visible. All of that is not more than 450 billion shillings. What no one is asking is, where is the 2.5 trillion shillings going? Of course, in talking about how MPs are paying themselves a lot and our leaders are getting a lot of money, we have continuously peddled this feeling that a lot of money goes on that end. Even if you are to do away with Parliament entirely, that is the Senate and the National Assembly entirely, you'll only save 43 billion shillings. Entirely 43. Last year they had 38 billion shillings. If you did away with devolution today, it's just 316 billion shillings. And we have got a budget of 3-point-something trillion. Where is 2.5 trillion shillings going? I'll tell you. Number 1, 600 billion shillings going to debt. And now Parliament has actually been convinced they are lifting up the ceiling to 9 trillion. And no one is telling us how we are going to recover that. A lot of this money is going to the executive. That is where the problem is, and we do not want to tell the people the truth. That's why so many of these other initiatives, including Punguza Mzigo, is actually getting off. Because you are telling us to do away to amalgamate counties. Like I have told you, out of 3.1 trillion, only 450 billion shillings goes to the other arms of government plus devolution.
So joining some of the counties,
it doesn't make sense. We need to restructure our executive. We need to actually stop corruption. Because we are building a road, a kilometer at 3 billion shillings. As in, the corruption, especially within the executive, is what is bleeding this country. Do that mathematics. It's sensible. We're talking about 450 billion shillings, and no one is talking about 2.5 trillion shillings, and they are safe. Look at the kind of projects they're doing. That is where the problem is. Devolution is not expensive, and it's working. The legislature, even if we feel we are paying MPs so much, but if we're giving them so much work, we must take care of them. That's the truth. So It's not a lot of money, it's 43 billion shillings. And I'm talking about 2.6% of the national budget, 2 point something. So please ask where 2.5 trillion is going. So Kaikai, I do not think we should actually amalgamate counties. It is a lie that has been peddled. Devolution is not expensive. Even with the thrift you see there, it's not a lot of money. We need to be asking where this other money is going. And we have now allowed them to now borrow as much as 9 trillion shillings.
And to address unemployment, the proposal there by Anne saying we should actually cap it at a certain level.
Number one, the government does not have money to pay for pension. That is why they are unable to send off some guys and they are raising up guys. Two, from purely a wage bill perspective, it only makes sense to raise that retirement age. That's the truth. Okay. Government is an enabler of services and not necessarily the creator of jobs. So purely from a wage bill perspective, it is safer because you have come, for example, you are here at Nation. Yes. Nation has spent resources in building your capacity and everything else. And I'll give you a practical example. Somebody comes into government probably at 27. After you have done everything worked elsewhere. You come in at 27. Then you retire at 50 the way Jaguar is proposing. You've only worked for 23 years. You live for 80 years. Then we will be paying you for the next 30 years. You worked for 23 years?
Yeah.
And you see, and we have hired somebody else to do the work you are doing. So we need, of course, to rationalize our civil service, but the issue around age, and even Jaguar knows that is populism. We are talking about 23,000 slots that are available for guys who are over 55. And whereas that is a good number, we can bring in people, but that will not take care of the 5 million people that are structurally unemployed. So it is good. These people, some of them have got experience, and I actually need to say this, that if you have ever had contact with civil servants, some of the patriots we have in this country are civil servants. They wake up in the morning to ensure that the bureaucracy works. They work. Of course, there is sleaze and there is places where service is not provided. But there are some people in civil service who honestly are the first patriots you will not meet, more than some of us probably in the streets. They work, they deliver, and ensure that things work. No one you will hear about them. You will not, for example, the airspace this night, somebody was taking care of it. You woke up and slept, you didn't care. People are taking care of our borders. Somebody ensures that there is immunization for our children. Those people are not celebrated. There are people who just ensure that some things work. Of course, there are other places, and largely government is known for not doing service very well, but there are guys who work here. So I do not think that issues around here, and it's very expensive to send these 20-something guys, 20-something thousand guys home. It's expensive, government does not have money. Two, we are milking that so that if you go home, you have, probably we do not have to have a lot. Because again, it is a constitutional that social protection is a big thing. So I will say that can we challenge our leaders to spur the economy? Because you realize that every time we have got a booming economy, jobs are created. Can we talk to our leadership and bring in leadership that really cares and understands? It's not that our leaders, but they don't care. They just don't get it. It's not that they really don't get it, but they really do not know what is happening, but greed. And the way we do our politics is that we are continuously bringing in the same people. Mark, as a finish, I need to just point out this, that every year we do elections, about 67% of MPs go home. Yet every time politicians go to parliament, they behave like those guys we send home. That level of attrition. What is the problem? The problem is either the process or us. From where we get it. That is why I will still take it back to the person. That this country is where it is because of the efforts of people. And if we work harder, we will get much ahead. It's not where it is because of politicians.
And we get the leaders that we deserve because we vote for them. That's been said many times. Now, let's respond to something as we conclude. And you've heard the submissions by the separate panelists, but this was something that was said by the president. And I don't know if you caught it over the week and if it convinced you. This was his response to what he called detractors of the Building Bridges initiative. And he called them, this is a President Uhuru Kenyatta, he called them conmen. And he was quite actually mad in terms of the talks that have been around this Building Bridges initiative and the report that is already out, already ready to be delivered actually. And so this is what he said earlier in the week.
Musidanganywe, mupende nchi yenu, mupende nchi yenu. Mujipende nyinyi wenyewe. Mujiheshimu nyinyi wenyewe. BBI sio ati wanasema ati BBI Uhuru anataka kazi. Mimi sitaki kazi, nimechoka. BBI ni kuhakikisha ya kwamba hakuna Mkenya atamwaga damu tena katika nchi yetu kwa sababu ya siasa.
That was earlier in the week. I'll start with Franklin Kwanja. You wrote something about the BBI report, and you said in the Standard that the BBI report should catalyze genuine national dialogue. When you listen to the president in terms of what he believes the BBI is or is meant to be, are you convinced?
I mean, Mark, we have to appreciate that this country has to overcome the upheavals that are come to it politically. And the weakest link in the development and progress of this country is the political class. We have also to underscore the fact that the selfless, the altruism demonstrated by the president and his protagonist, Honorable Raila Odinga, on 9th March 2018, really served to point us in the right direction. So we must take that handshake as the initiation of a national dialogue towards governance reforms than really the end in itself.
Yes.
So the report coming to be having been prepared, and the team itself has argued that it's quite comprehensive, it's responding to the 9-point agenda issues. We must then pitch this report because of its political capital that it has out of the promoters of the process, and the critical issues that the report addresses, and the likelihood that this report is going to upstage other critical reports, TJRC, Kriegler report, the CPEB report that address this political governance and democracy development issues. We must make sure that the launch or the release of the report then becomes that trigger that leads us into a real honest national dialogue and question ourselves, what are the administrative, policy, legal, and if any constitutional reforms that we require to fix this country. Because if we don't get our political culture correct, if we don't improve on our democratic governance, basically addressing the very, the deep roots of good governance, rule of law, and making sure that our institutions are functioning, we will not be able to address anything. And also there is that demand side, but there is the supply side of these things, and where I agree with my brother Arnold, that we have to work on the civic competence of Kenyans. We cannot point fingers at the leadership that we have because it's a reflection of who we are as a people. If we have governors that we are complaining of their abilities, their incompetence, and their shortcomings, and we elected them. If we have an IBC that cannot perform its functions, and we are blaming the chairman and the few commissioners, when it is teachers and pastors that are presiding officers and rig elections, then we are shooting ourselves in the foot. We must candidly speak to each other, face each other in the eye, and candidly have a conversation of where do we want to take this country next. And that destination is the route, is having an honest national dialogue. The BBI report, with its political capital, with the issue that it addresses, with the possibility that it's going to render redundant the other judicial reports, and even the other propositions from political and other civic actors, we must be able to compel that the handshake cannot be the panacea, but it must be the beginning of us having a genuine conversation to resolve our issues.
All right, and we have less than 5 minutes, but I have to hand it to the rest of the panel to also conclude on this issue and anything else that you really are passionate about in terms of coming to submit to the nation. Nancy, many people have said this BBI thing has been above them, about them. What's your perception of this, and do you see an opportunity for the rest of the nation?
I do see an opportunity, and again, when the president speaks like that, you have to see genuine frustration, meaning that also all other things notwithstanding, that he may be making real effort, trying to get the country to have dialogue and speak together. And if he's finding it difficult, which he is, it means that maybe he needs to bring in a young advisor. I don't know who's the youngest person advising the president, so that he can penetrate and be able to impact the majority, who are the young people, and so that his efforts therefore are not frustrated. Given that we have entrusted him with the job and it's not yet over, then his frustration is a call for help. And I extend a hand, a mind, to be of assistance, because and I don't want money. I want to contribute to the conversation in the sense that this is what we need to do to be able to get the conversation to become effective. It is not about money. It's not about the billions of shillings or trillions that are being stolen. It's about people having conversations and them being effective. And so, yes, I feel there is a genuineness in the president's speech and him saying he's frustrated, that there is something genuine. And to just echo what they have said is that if these are our leaders, it is a reflection of our society. And if the executive is taking most of the money, and I have seen individuals around where I come from line up to get money from MPs who are vying, or members of parliament who are vying for positions. And that money then that is going through corruption is to come back to Kenyans and give them 500 shillings during the 2022 elections. So we need to be to have integrity in this process. And only that can change the dynamics that we're currently having in the nation.
All right. What opportunities do you see, Nerima, as Executive Director at Siasa Place? The BBI is almost out. The president, he says, I'm not looking for a job, I'm tired. What's your response, and what do you look forward to?
I think we say a lot of things, but I'm looking forward to seeing the report. What's the difference between it and TGRC?
You don't think it necessarily will render redundant all these other reports, as Franklin has mentioned?
No, I don't. And I think that one of the things that we always seem to escape is the fact that we have historical injustices. As long as we do not look into that with intentionality of fixing that issue, we will not go anywhere as a country. And even the issues that we're seeing today, when we're talking about access to resources, we're talking about equality, we're talking about people feeling less equal than others. And this is deep, it's to the core of us as citizens of this country. And those are the conversations we need to be having, not about him quitting his job or anything like that. That's actually very petty. We are missing the deep point here.
All right. Arnold?
I don't think we need to review the Constitution. They say a lazy man argues and quarrels with his tools. The Constitution, as it were, is actually perfect. I belong to that team that says timiza katiba. We don't need punguza mzigo. We don't need the BBI process. What we need is to implement this Constitution. We did not invent a lot of that stuff. We picked them from other jurisdictions where they work. We have not implemented the Constitution. What we have is a laziness of ideas, a politics devoid of innovation, a lack of political goodwill. There is most of those proposals that are being put out there can be taken care of administratively and without doing review to the law.
Is there any optimism in you towards the BBI?
The BBI
given
process,
the process it has been?
Most of the process that they want to take care of can actually be taken care of administratively and without changing the law. Because once we go to another referendum, normally people don't have time to do rehearsals for elections. So you have got a referendum, you've given people free hand to have a rehearsal for the next elections. Then we will polarize the country when what we all need to do can honestly be taken care of administratively. We did not change the law for the handshake to happen. Which constitutional review happened before the handshake happened? It didn't. It was just a matter of people doing good decency, a president showing up and realizing that being magnanimous in victory is actually the leader's bend. So most of the things people are talking about can be taken care of administratively without changing the law. Mr. President, timiza katiba.
Timiza katiba. And we'll leave it at that point. And the national address to various people, whether to the citizen or to the leadership, that has been made here by the panel will be made available on our platforms in case you missed them. Quite some powerful themes that have been brought out here on the Leadership Forum by Nerima Wako Ojiwa from the Siasa Place, Arnold Maliba, Public Policy Analyst, as well as Franklin Mkwanja, Executive Director, Center for Multi-Party Democracy, and Nancy Ongome. She is CEO at Solvis Coaching Group. You can get in touch with her if you want some personal coaching, and also get in touch with them on the various online platforms to get the conversation going. I'm sure you'd want to hear much more from the topics of discussion today. But Mashujaa Day is on Sunday, and our team is ready to give the best coverage of that and to see what themes will be from there, what the president will be saying, and if indeed that BBI report will be delivered on the same day, but perhaps not to steal from the show. It perhaps will be launched later on. But we'll see about that as the stories and developments continue. My director CK is chasing me out of studio, but on behalf of her and the team behind this that you don't get to see in studio, Eve and Omache, but he seems to have just checked in. Thank you for watching, and also to the digital team that is driving the conversation online. Have yourself a good morning and a good Friday. Take care. It's going to be a rainy week.